Daniel stood frozen in the middle of the living room, the folder in his hands trembling slightly. He had rehearsed this moment 100 times in his mind. He imagined his father leaning in, listening carefully, showing pride in his work. He imagined his sister nodding, impressed by his dedication. But reality hit like a cold splash of water in the face. His father laughed, a loud, harsh, dismissive laugh that made the walls feel smaller, the air thicker. "Your sister did everything herself, not you," he said, throwing the words like daggers. "She earned everything. You? You just talk." Daniel's stomach dropped. He wanted to reply, to defend himself, to tell his father he had worked harder than anyone realized, that he had sacrificed months, sleepless nights, and every ounce of energy to get here. But his voice caught. It refused to come out. All he could do was stand there, holding the folder like a fragile shield against the humiliation that seemed to fill the room. His sister Leah lingered in the doorway. She didn't say a word. She didn't even look at him. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke volumes. She wasn't defending him. She wasn't trying to explain anything. She simply let the words land, let the blow fall. And Daniel felt it. He felt the cold sting of being invisible in his own family. He wanted to run. He wanted to smash the folder against the floor and scream, to make someone, anyone, understand how badly this hurt. But he stayed. He stayed because part of him still hoped there might be a spark of recognition in his father's eyes, some sign that he had been seen, that his effort had mattered. There was none. Only laughter. Only dismissal. The weight of years of comparison, of being measured against Leah, pressed down on him. Every achievement he had made, every goal he had reached seemed suddenly insignificant in his father's eyes. Every opportunity seemed to have been meant for Leah, every compliment reserved for her. And now, with this one laugh, one sentence, Daniel felt the last thread of hope snap taut as he walked out of the house. The world outside seemed suddenly sharper, colder, harsher. The air stung his lungs, the sky felt heavier, and the distant sound of cars and voices blurred into nothing. He could feel his pulse hammering in his ears, the rush of adrenaline mingling with hurt and anger. His father's words echoed again and again, a cruel mantra he couldn't escape. "Your sister did everything herself, not you." Each repetition fueled something inside him, something dangerous. The hurt twisted into bitterness. The bitterness sharpened into determination. Daniel realized he couldn't let this slide. He couldn't let the world or his family believe he was nothing. He couldn't let his father's laughter define him. Not anymore. He thought about Leah. She was always perfect in their father's eyes. Talented, smart, capable everything Daniel was told he wasn't. And yet he remembered the moments that no one else saw. The times he had helped her. The nights he stayed up to support her projects. The sacrifices he made quietly, unseen. He had been there, and yet, when it mattered, when acknowledgement was possible, she stood silent. That silence, that refusal to speak for him, burned deeper than the insult itself. It wasn't just his father who had wronged him. It was the whole system of favoritism, of comparison, of invisible walls built around success. And now that wall had closed again, shutting him out. The walk through the streets was a blur. Daniel's mind raced. He thought of all the moments he had been overlooked, all the opportunities that had slipped through his fingers. He thought of his father's disappointed look when he failed to meet expectations, the casual way he dismissed Daniel's successes, and the pride he always reserved for Leah. Every memory sharpened the ache inside him, but it also sparked a plan. He didn't know how yet, but he knew one thing. He couldn't let this continue. He wouldn't let them win. He wouldn't let anyone continue to see him as a failure. That laugh, that cruel declaration, had ignited a fire he didn't know was there. And now, it demanded attention. That evening, Daniel sat in his room, the folder still clutched on his lap. He opened it again, leafing through the pages of his work, examining every detail with renewed focus. He looked at diagrams, notes, and plans that had consumed countless hours. And he realized that this wasn't just about proving his father wrong anymore. It wasn't about making Leah jealous or making them notice him. It was about proving to himself that he was capable, that he mattered, that his efforts had weight, regardless of anyone else's recognition. And with that thought, a new energy coursed through him, a mix of anger, resolve, and clarity. The humiliation had shifted into a purpose. He wasn't just angry. He was alive, and he was determined. Sleep came fitfully. He dreamed of confrontations, of scenarios where he could finally be recognized, finally respected. Some dreams were victorious, some filled with tension and fear, but all of them carried the same pulse of urgency. In the morning, the sunlight didn't bring peace. It brought anticipation. Daniel knew the world had not seen the last of him. The fire that had sparked in the living room that day had grown overnight into a steady flame. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was a strategy forming, a plan for action that demanded patience and focus. He realized that revenge, subtle and calculated, would be the way forward. Not through chaos or destruction, but through proving himself, through making undeniable impact. Even as he went about his daily routines, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling of tension. Every conversation, every glance, every interaction with his family reminded him of the gap between recognition and neglect. He noticed the way his father praised Leah effortlessly, the way he avoided looking at Daniel with any genuine interest, and the way his sister moved through life untouched by consequence. It all built in Daniel a keen awareness, a readiness to act. He began to think like a strategist, observing weaknesses, opportunities, and moments that could be leveraged. The hurt had evolved into foresight, and with foresight came control. By the end of the week, Daniel had made a decision. He would not confront them in anger. He would not yell or beg or demand recognition. That was for the weak, for the desperate. He wanted something more lasting, something they couldn't ignore. He wanted to make them see him, not through confrontation, but through undeniable action. He would build, he would plan, he would wait for the perfect moment. And when that moment came, he would act in a way that could not be dismissed, that would force acknowledgement without words. The fire of humiliation had become a steady, controlled blaze of determination. Daniel's reflection in the mirror showed a new expression. There was anger there, yes, but also focus, clarity, and a quiet threat. He no longer felt the sting of his father's laughter as weakness. He felt it as fuel. Every laugh, every dismissive comment, every comparison had been stored, catalogued, and turned into energy for what was coming next. He didn't yet know the details, but he knew the direction. He would rise, and when he did, the family who had ignored him would have no choice but to see him, respect him, or reckon with the consequences of underestimating him. And as Daniel closed the folder and walked toward the window, staring at the darkening city beyond, he whispered to himself a vow he would carry for weeks, months, perhaps years. They will see me. They will remember my name, and I will not be invisible again. Weeks passed after that day in the living room, but Daniel did not return to the same person he had been before. He moved through life quietly, almost invisibly, but his mind was sharp, active, constantly analyzing every detail around him. He watched his family from a distance, noticing patterns he had ignored before. His father's predictable praise for Leah, the way he smiled at her achievements, the way he dismissed Daniel without a second thought. It all became data, information he could use. And his sister Leah remained the same brilliant, focused person everyone admired. But now, Daniel saw cracks, too tiny ones, almost imperceptible, like hairline fractures in glass. And he decided he would exploit them, not recklessly, but with precision. Every morning, Daniel woke up with a plan forming in his head. He wasn't just angry anymore. He was calculating. He would wait for the perfect opportunity, something that could not be ignored. Leah had been preparing for the biggest project of her career, something their father endlessly boasted about, something that would elevate her reputation in ways Daniel had always envied. That project became his focus. He knew the stakes. One misstep could ruin her, not through malice, but through careful manipulation of timing and chance. Yet, even as he prepared, part of him hesitated. He kept replaying the memory of his father laughing, dismissing him. That moment wasn't just humiliation, it was fuel, and he intended to turn it into results. But the line between action and destruction was fine, and he felt its weight. Daniel began researching everything about Leah's project. He studied documents he had no business seeing, emails he wasn't supposed to read, her schedules, her strategy sessions. He found gaps not large enough for anyone else to notice, but enough that, if handled subtly, could create doubt and tension. The key wasn't to destroy her. Not yet. The key was leverage. To show his father subtly that he was not to be ignored, that he had insight, control, and patience. He imagined the moment when his father would realize Daniel had been watching, understanding, waiting. That thought sent a rush through him, a mixture of satisfaction and anxiety. He had never felt so alive. Even as he focused on the plan, Daniel wrestled with his conscience. He knew what he was doing bordered on betrayal. Leah was family, and she hadn't hurt him directly. In fact, she had probably done everything she could to succeed without malice. Yet, he reminded himself of the countless times she hadn't stood up for him, the countless occasions their father valued her over him. He told himself it wasn't personal against her. It was about balance, about justice, about finally being seen. Still, at night, he lay awake and questioned himself. Would revenge feel satisfying, or would it leave him emptier than before? He didn't yet know, but the pull of action was intoxicating. It whispered that recognition was at the end of risk. Daniel also watched Leah carefully. He saw her anxiety, the weight of expectation pressing down on her. She was meticulous, disciplined, almost perfectionist. And yet, even she had vulnerabilities. He saw how her confidence wavered when deadlines approached, how she second-guessed decisions she had once been sure of. He remembered that part of her that had once been kind to him, and it made the plan harder to execute. There was a sister there he had loved, and a competitor he had never wanted to fight. The complexity of these emotions only sharpened his strategy. Daniel realized revenge wasn't simple. It never was. It required patience, awareness, and precision. Acting, too, quickly could ruin him as much as it could ruin anyone else. His days became a rhythm of observation and planning. He attended family events, appearing polite, quiet, unassuming, all the while mentally mapping his moves. Every word, every gesture, every glance he witnessed added to the larger picture. He noticed how his father relied heavily on appearances, how Leah trusted certain partners implicitly, and how small mistakes often went unnoticed until they compounded. Daniel began building contingency plans, imagining scenarios in which he could subtly guide events without appearing to intervene. It was a game of chess, And for the first time, he felt confident as a player. Even in moments of social normalcy, Daniel's mind never rested. A family dinner became an opportunity to observe dialogue, note tension, and consider timing. A casual comment from Leah became a potential weakness. A minor oversight from a colleague became a clue. Every piece of information was fuel. Every observation was a stepping stone. And yet, Daniel's resolve was not driven by hate alone. It was driven by a desire to be recognized, to be seen, to assert control over a life where he had long felt powerless. The plan became less about hurting Leah and more about proving his own competence, his own worth. That was the line he drew. Though he knew it would blur Dot as the days turned into weeks, the tension inside Daniel built. He could feel the moment approaching, the point when the plan could either succeed spectacularly or backfire disastrously. His hands shook sometimes, not out of fear, but from anticipation. He imagined the consequences: his father's shock, Leah's confusion, the subtle shift in family dynamics. It wasn't a plan for chaos. It was a plan for revelation. And yet, Daniel knew that every action carried risk. Every miscalculation could undo months of preparation. That knowledge kept him alert, meticulous, and restless. Sleep became scarce, and every day stretched longer, filled with both excitement and dread. Amid this, Daniel's mind wandered to morality. He had studied stories, heard advice, and read warnings about revenge. He knew the danger. It could consume him, twist his character, and leave him empty. He questioned himself constantly. Was he better than his father's dismissal? Was he stronger than the bitterness threatening to control him? These questions lingered, gnawing at him even as he focused on execution. He realized that revenge, while tempting, was also a mirror. It reflected back everything he feared about himself. Every insecurity, every desire for validation. To act, he would have to confront not just his father and sister, but himself. Late one night, Daniel discovered a critical piece of information. Leah's project relied heavily on a partnership she trusted implicitly. A partnership that had a single vulnerability. He realized that if he subtly exposed a flaw or guided her into a slight misstep, it would test her resilience without destroying her entirely. This was the edge he had been seeking. It was precise, calculated, and low risk, yet high impact. His pulse raced as he imagined the outcome. He was close now, closer than ever before to asserting his presence in a family that had ignored him for too long. But the closer he got, the more he felt the tension inside him, an internal battle between satisfaction and guilt, between anticipation and fear. Daniel's obsession grew. Every interaction with Leah, every observation of his father became part of a living map of strategy. He was no longer just the overlooked son. He was a force quietly gathering strength, waiting for the perfect moment. The line between planning and obsession blurred, but he didn't care. The fire inside him demanded focus, and he gave it fully. And yet, in rare moments of clarity, he glimpsed what could happen if he went too far. He saw himself losing Leah's trust, destroying the bond they once had, and possibly becoming the person he had despised in his father's dismissals. Those thoughts lingered, but they were fleeting. The plan was bigger than fear, bigger than hesitation. The thrill of potential. Victory pushed him forward. Finally, the night before the critical moment arrived, Daniel sat in his room, reviewing every note, every observation, every potential outcome. His pulse was steady but excited, his mind sharp and alert. He could see it all, how his actions could ripple through Leah's project, how his father might react, how the family dynamic could shift subtly yet permanently. He was ready, not for chaos, not for revenge and anger, but for a calculated revelation that would demand acknowledgement. He was ready to prove himself, to assert his worth without destroying everything in the process. And in that moment, Daniel understood that revenge wasn't about hating anyone. It was about claiming control over a life that had always felt denied to him. The night before Leah's big launch, Daniel sat alone in his small apartment, staring at the laptop in front of him. Every detail of her project was mapped in his mind, every vulnerability analyzed, every potential impact imagined. He could see it all clearly: the small gaps in communication, the over-reliance on a few key partners, the pressure points where stress could lead to mistakes. All of it, in theory, could be used to force a shift, to make his presence impossible to ignore. His pulse raced at the thought, a mix of anticipation and anxiety. He had planned meticulously, studied every angle, waited patiently. Now, he was on the verge of action. Yet the closer he got, the heavier the tension became. It wasn't just strategy anymore. It was moral weight pressing down on him. Leah was not his enemy. She had not wronged him directly. She had worked hard, earned respect, and lived her life with determination and intelligence. All Daniel wanted, all he had wanted for months, was recognition for his father, for himself. But the path to recognition required risking everything, including his relationship with his sister. He swallowed hard and reminded himself that the plan was careful, subtle, not destructive. It was a demonstration, not devastation. Still, the fear that he could cross a line gnawed at him. He replayed their childhood in his mind, the moments when he had been overlooked, dismissed, ignored in favor of Leah. Every praise she received, every celebration, every small gesture of acknowledgement from their father had been a reminder of his invisibility. And yet, he also remembered Leah in moments of kindness, teaching him, guiding him, sharing her knowledge without expectation. Those memories made the edge of his plan sharper, more complicated. Revenge was no longer simple. It was a test of character, a moral puzzle that weighed on him as heavily as any strategic consideration. Daniel opened the laptop and examined the data one last time. He had a choice. He could act now, subtly nudging events so that minor mistakes would surface, causing stress and tension for Leah, drawing her father's attention to Daniel's own competence. Or he could step back, walk away, and prove his worth in another way. His finger hovered over the trackpad, heart racing. He imagined his father's face if Daniel executed the plan perfectly, a mix of shock, realization, and maybe a grudging respect. That imagined moment made him feel alive, but it also made him uneasy. Would recognition gained through manipulation feel like victory, or would it hollow him out? The apartment door opened quietly, and Leah stepped in. She had returned unexpectedly, her hair slightly disheveled, her face tired but determined. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice almost trembling. "I've been looking for you." There was no accusation, no anger, just concern. Her eyes searched his, as if trying to see the person he had become. He felt a jolt in his chest. In that moment, he realized that all his plotting, all his calculations, could be revealed in a single glance. "I'm sorry," she continued, stepping closer. "Dad was wrong that day. And I was wrong too. I should have said something. I should have stood up for you." Her words hit harder than any plan, harder than months of plotting. Daniel froze. He had expected confrontation, resistance, maybe even dismissal. He had not expected apology, not expected understanding. The anger that had fueled him for weeks suddenly wavered. The fire inside him flickered, uncertain. He looked at Leah, seeing her not as a rival or an obstacle, but as the sister who had always been there, even when circumstances had kept them apart. Her hand reached out, tentative but sincere. "We don't have to be enemies," she said. "Not over this. Not ever." Daniel's mind raced. He had spent weeks imagining the perfect move, the precise moment to assert control, to demand acknowledgement, to finally shift the balance. But now, all of it seemed small, petty, unnecessary. For a long moment, he simply stared at her. His mind replayed every plan, every observation, every calculation. He imagined executing the strategy, watching the subtle chaos unfold, seeing his father's surprise, imagining the validation he would finally receive. And then he imagined the aftermath, the tension with Leah, the regret, the possibility of becoming the person he had despised in his father's laughter. The scales tipped. The choice was clearer than it had ever been. Slowly, Daniel closed the laptop. He tucked it away, a symbolic gesture of restraint. Leah's eyes widened slightly, confused, and he gave a small, wry smile. "Nothing," he said quietly. "Just something I don't need anymore." Relief, disbelief, and curiosity flickered across her face, but she didn't press. Instead, she nodded, understanding more than words could express. That night, Daniel walked through the quiet streets alone. The air was crisp, carrying the faint sounds of the city winding down. He felt no exhilaration, no rush of triumph, no vindication. Instead, there was a profound stillness, a sense of clarity he had not expected. He had the power to disrupt, to manipulate, to assert himself in ways that could have permanently altered the dynamics of his family. But he had chosen another path, one that demanded patience, moral courage, and self-restraint. The weight of that choice settled in his chest like a stone, grounding him. Daniel reflected on the nature of revenge as he walked. He realized that anger alone was insufficient to define him, that reactionary moves could only hollow him out. True power, he understood now, lay in self-control, in making choices that affirmed his own character rather than responding to perceived slights. He had glimpsed the path of destruction, had held it in his hands, and had deliberately let it go. That act, he realized, was more difficult than any act of retaliation. He also thought of his father. The man's laughter, once so cruel, still echoed in Daniel's mind. But it no longer hurt the same way. The sting had dulled, transformed into awareness. Daniel had discovered that he did not need external validation to define his worth. Recognition, from others, even from those he had longed to impress, was transient. What mattered was the integrity of his own choices, the measure of restraint he could exercise in the face of provocation. Daniel's thoughts returned to Leah. She had offered him understanding, compassion, and a chance to preserve their bond. He felt a small, unexpected warmth in his chest, a reassurance that relationships could survive tension, that family could heal, even after neglect and comparison. He realized that revenge, while tempting, could only ever give temporary satisfaction. It could not repair bonds, nor could it create lasting respect. Only deliberate, thoughtful action could do that. By the time he returned to his apartment, Daniel felt lighter. The weight of planning, plotting, and anticipating had been replaced by clarity and purpose. He had not acted on impulse, and he had chosen a path that preserved both his integrity and his relationships. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of peace, not triumph, not satisfaction, but a steady, enduring awareness that he had acted correctly, that he had chosen the better path. The next morning, Daniel watched Leah leave for her launch. She moved with determination and focus, unaware of how close she had come to disruption, unaware of the careful restraint Daniel had exercised. And yet, In a way, Daniel felt that the moment had been a victory, not over Leah, not over his father, but over the part of himself that could have been consumed by anger and resentment. He had proven to himself that he was capable of power, but also of wisdom. As the day unfolded, Daniel reflected on the broader truth of revenge and recognition. Anger and plotting might provide a fleeting thrill, but they left scars sometimes. On others, always on oneself. Real strength, he realized, lay in measured action, in empathy, and in the courage to resist the temptation of retribution. He had glimpsed both paths, and he had chosen the one that preserved his character, even in the face of provocation. That evening, when Leah returned, she found Daniel waiting with a quiet smile. No lectures, no tension, only acknowledgement and a willingness to move forward. They spoke briefly, sharing mutual understanding, a bond rebuilt on honesty and restraint. Daniel felt a subtle shift inside himself, a sense of self-respect that no act of revenge could have created. He understood now that recognition, true recognition, came not from proving others wrong, but from knowing oneself, from acting with integrity, even when anger whispered the opposite. And in that quiet moment, Daniel knew that the fire that had once burned for revenge had transformed into something far more enduring, a controlled, purposeful strength that could guide him through life. He had chosen the difficult path, the path that demanded courage and patience. And in doing so, he had discovered a deeper sense of victory, one that no laughter, no dismissal, and no comparison could ever take away.